This is part one of a little tour of the Living Legends of Auto Racing Museum in South Daytona, Florida. This is a recreation of the workshop of somebody by the name of Red Vogt, V-O-G-T. And you know, it didn't mean anything to me, but I looked it up, and this guy was an amazing mechanic. Here are some of the things that he would work on. Here's an Offenhauser block. Offenhauser engines were famous at Indianapolis. Here we have some parts that were specially made made stronger to withstand the rigors of racing. Here it explains a little bit about what they had to do to parts to get them to survive racing. And Red was particularly adept at getting a lot out of engines. I have a reference to a tremendous article about the guy. There's an old rocket engine. Impressive just to see it sitting there. And he would take an engine, take it apart, and make sure that the passages for the oil and for the coolant were expanded, and just amazing. He was primarily a Ford guy, but he would, if somebody paid him to work on a Chevy engine, which by the way, there's an early fuel cell, and coming up is a Chevy V8. If somebody wanted him to work on that, he had no problem doing that. He'd work on any engine. And he didn't use micrometers and fancy things like that. He did a lot by feel. This article about him is an argument by his son that he actually should have been given credit for founding NASCAR. And so I'm going to let you read that and see what you decide, see what you think. There's, by the way, a flathead Ford taken apart. See what you think. That I think the guy, there's no dispute, he was a tremendous mechanic. Started out in Atlanta. I guess he was born in Washington, D.C., and then was a mechanic and into racing in Atlanta, and then finally moved down to Daytona. And look at that, that's an experimental part of a run-flat tire. Must have been neat to be on the cutting edge of the development of all this technology. And certainly racing, that was his primary goal. Besides providing some excitement and fun, was to be a testing bed for racing and development of cars. And there's his tool chest and his invoices, and just there's his grinding machine. Just amazing. Yeah, his lathe right there. That's his lathe. Trophy, I didn't stop to see what that was about, but it's a big one. And there's another flathead. This Ford came down to see him. Henry Ford came down to see him and said, "How do you get all this horsepower out of my engine?" So he showed him. You can imagine, here's a guy who shared that kind of information and really didn't expect anything back, from what I can see, and just a tremendously genuine and generous person. Here are a couple. This is kind of near where I grew up. Different speedways in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. The early days of racing. the Langhorne Speedway, and yeah, interesting. And now the last engine here is the famous Hudson Hornet with dual carburation, 6-cylinder flathead. And believe me, these were the king of the racetrack before the V8s got a foothold. Twin H power. Very interesting visit. And the admission, believe it or not, is free. It's in a shopping center in South Daytona. And I'll leave a reference to it also in the conversation of the video. It's worth the trip, and I have more videos about it too.